Hi everyone. Hello. Hola, ¿qué tal? I'm very excited to be here today. I'm going to start this talk by asking you to close your eyes. Close your eyes, don't worry, I won't do anything weird. I'm seeing you're not closing your eyes. Puedo verte. And think about a situation. You're working hard, really hard on a feature. You put in all your effort. You spend so many hours trying to deploy the new feature to master, trying to do the best work you can do, just to open your eyes, get the following message in the code review from your colleague. Now, I'm not sure what about you, but I don't want to really work with this person. Yeah? So let's talk about code review. As developers, part of our work is not only to develop features. We are also in charge of reviewing other people's code, our colleagues, or even other teams' work if they are touching our own code base, our own repository. And I've been working in the industry for over a decade, and I've seen different practices when it comes to code review. And in this talk, I'm going to share with you best practices that I have learned throughout the years, and I hope that they will help you to make better code review process that will improve your productivity, delivery, and quality of service, and hopefully also the team and work and collaboration. So let's get started. So if you receive a code review as a reviewer, when you receive a code review that looks like this, with so many lines of code changes, not sure what about you, but I don't really want to check this amount of line changes. I will probably put it off for later as much as I can. And reviewing this PR will be really frustrating. You might find me looking like this, or even like this, right? And there is also an issue when you take a lot of time to review the code. You will also have a lot of ping pong with messages like change this, change that. No, I don't agree with you. So this is the fun kind of ping pong, but comments in a code review and all this back and forth with our colleague are not really fun. So save the ping pong for later. And we can avoid, and also the larger the code change, the bigger is the likelihood that we will introduce new bugs because we're touching a lot of areas in the code and there is a risk with that, right? And I'm not talking about also the fact that there are other PRs waiting to be merged, and if they're smaller, they might be merged before ours, and if we are touching the same areas of the file, the same code base, it even riskier because then we have merge conflict, and this time we are the one who wrote the code. We're frustrating because we need to resolve all those conflicts, and it's really not fun, and we need to test the entire code all over again. So in order to avoid this, we want to break the task as much as possible to a smaller subtask. That way, when we create a pull request, it is small, it's manageable, it's more appealing to a colleague to review, and they can review the code faster. As a result, it will result in a faster development lifecycle. So you can all agree that this PR is much manageable. So keep in mind, make it simple, make it appealing. And also a good practice is to give context. Do you recognize one of the people in the picture? Hi, Aviatar. Great talk. So whenever we create a PR, it's best advice to give a context. Why was the change introduced? Why it was needed? Include a link to the Jira ticket. If you are working with a staging environment, if you deploy to a testing environment that the QA or your team or colleague that reviews the code can review it, you can add a link to the environment. That way you have the one single place when your colleagues can review all the necessary information they need in order to review the code. So there is also a way to do in GitHub a pull request template. It allows you to align each PR of the team to a certain standard. You can specify what is needed. For example, you can create this following template, having a link to the ticket, context, what is the change that was made. If you're working on a UI feature, if you change the UI, like a diet, do a before and after picture, you can also add this. If you're adding unit test, you can also specify whether or not you added unit test, whether or not you tested the feature yourself. So it's a really great way to align everything, to align the team to a certain standard and communication. It would look something like this, which is really pretty. You can preview it, and whenever you create a PR, automatically you will get this template that you will fill, and it will look like this at the end. So it's really, really great. And you need to set the rule and manage the expectation. When you create a code review, you should talk to your team, make a standard. For example, how many reviewers do you require to review the code? Whether you need just one reviewer or maybe two. For a critical feature, we might want two. We might want to have a certain person looking at our code as a mandatory. So set the rules, how many reviewers do you need to have? So requires approval. You can also specify this on GitHub that you require approval from a specific person for a number of persons. So it's really a great tool that you can use in order to have these standards all specified. You see here, required approval, 2. And also, some of us, raise your hand if you like to use single quotes, single quotation. Okay, cool. Double quotation? Okay, less hands. So we have difference in our styling, right? And we have different, some of us prefer 2 space, others prefer the tab of 4 spaces, and this affects the result of the PR. We might see changes in the PR that really about styling and not about the essence of the code change. So if we use prettier, if we make standards like this, we avoid the noise, the unnecessary noise that is added to a PR if we don't specify the rules like this. And let's talk about pulling from the pool. So some teams work in a Kanban methods, meaning they have their to-do task, regular task, on a list, and whenever a teammate is free to do her next job, she just pulls a ticket from the pool and start working on it. That way, nobody sits idle, it's best for productivity and stuff like that. And the same approach can be applied to a pull request. We can assign the pull request to the entire team. That way, whenever our colleague is free, she can take the PR and start reviewing it. Now make sure that whenever you review a colleague's PR, assign the PR to yourself as a reviewer, so the other team members will know that you are the one handling the PR. And we are all about communication. Communicate in the Slack channel or Teams or whatever you're using that you created a PR and ready to be merged, ready to be checked, and you appreciate the review. And be careful of the bystander effect. I'm also interested in psychology, not just computers. And the bystander effect is a psychology theory that claims that the larger the number of people present, the less is likely for someone to offer his or her help. Why is that? Because everybody else thinks that the other person is doing the job. So when we assign a PR for review for the entire team, each team member might think that the other team member is looking, resulting in a PR that is waiting forever, looking like a skeleton in the end, right? So it's better, like if you see that your PR hasn't been reviewed, make sure to ping your favorite person, like, hey, Aviatar, so I have this PR, can you please review it? Or, hey, Kevin, can you check my PR, please? I would just want to push the green button and publish the PR to the main branch. So be aware of this. And get a second opinion. Whenever you're working on a critical bug, it's always great to have a second opinion. You don't want to risk it breaking something in production, trust me, I know. And it has its benefit because when our colleagues review our code, they're also getting themselves familiar with the code base, with the changes, with the feature we are doing. And why it's important? Because if we are attending React Alicante, for example, and we have a bug in production, we know that our teammates have our back. We know that we can rest here and listen to the talks, and don't worry about if we break something or not. We are safe, they know the material, they went over the code, they have our backs, right? So it has its own benefit. And everybody in the last years talk about work-life balance with the COVID and started to work hybrid. We have kind of balanced our way through work and life and whatever works best for us. But what about code review balance? So we have a responsibility as developers to go on and develop our own features, but we also need to review others' team members' code. We want to make sure that features are being deployed, that are being added to the main branch, and if we want to make sure that we also get to work on a feature, because we also have deadlines that we need to keep, we need to make it a balance, because there is a context switch that happens when we switch between tasks. Whenever we are working on a task and we switch to a different task, it can take up to 25 minutes to regain focus on the next task. So we need to schedule our code review wisely. For example, if we have daily, which could have been an email, right? But if we have a meeting and then another meeting and we have like 30 minutes break in between, it's better to schedule this time for a PR review, rather than to work on a task only to be pulled out of it for another boring meeting, right? So schedule wisely. And consider the availability, because sometimes our team members that created the PR isn't available for questions. So make sure that whenever you choose to do the PR, it's better to make sure that the colleague who wrote the PR is available for questions, whether it's working from the workplace or whether from home. It will also help to speed up the process. And remember to be kind. It's really easy to be asshole. Sorry, hope I didn't break the code of conduct. But we're working with team. We want to keep a team environment for the best. It's really important to have a safe work environment. We don't want to be rude. We don't want to insult our colleagues. It's affect the entire process, the entire atmosphere, the entire productivity of the team. So be kind. And even if you think the code is completely shit, sorry, just find another way to say it. Maybe you could use an improvement, like, I like the way you put in the work, but have you thought of this and that and stuff like that? For example, if somebody is using memoization the wrong way, maybe he forgot to use callback on a method and it doesn't work as expected. So you can either write, it seems you don't really understand how memoization works if you forgot to add, so you can be really, a jerk. Or you can use it and be kind, and maybe if it's a junior developer or somebody who's less familiar with the basic, you can add an explanation, like saying, hey, memoization is great, but maybe you forgot to add something. You can add reference to the material that will help them kind of learn the topic even better, or make sure that they don't forget it in the next phase. So it's really important to use this to communicate, to be kind, etc. For example, if I would ask you to do a code review for the following code, what would you have written? Anybody? Looks good? Great. Looks good, and maybe suggest something? Yeah. With the magic numbers. So it's best whenever you're using numbers in the code. Here is the pi number. Use a constant with a meaningful name, so whenever other people look at the code, when there is numbers, they will know why those numbers were added to the code. And even you, sometimes we go to the code that we wrote, and for example, after a few months, we look at the code and like, who wrote this code? I don't remember. And then you do git blame, and you see it's yourself, and you completely forgot what you wrote. But it's the best way for readability, for clearness, to have constant instead of magical numbers. So keep it in mind, and you can offer this as a comment in the code review. And with great powers come great responsibility. We can leverage the code review as a teaching opportunity. We can teach our colleagues about, for example, we can add when relevant comments about clean code, about best practices, about performance improvement, about recommended design patterns, about stuff like that. So it is also a great way to leverage the PR for professional growth. Because when we get a comment, for example, about memoization should be used or something like that, we learn from it. When we have certain design patterns suggested, we learn from it. But not only the one who wrote the code learns it, or use it as a professional growth opportunity, but also the person who reads the PR. Because when we read other people's code, we see different kind of styles. We see different design patterns that they use. We see different approaches. So each and one of us can learn from our teammate other suggestions, other approaches that we can use and leverage later on in our next feature, in our next code. So it's really great opportunity of learning for both sides. And like there is a great TV shows and they do a prequel, we can also do like processes that will improve the result of the code eventually. We can do, for example, we can do product developer interaction processes that will improve the quality of the code and the resulting feature. Usually the products wants the feature to be ready like tomorrow, right? They're really, really anxious to deliver the feature on time. They say, I want this and that and this and that, and they paint this beautiful picture, this beautiful feature. Results doesn't always look the same. But in order for us to manage to deliver things on time, we have a feature hands-off, right? We can sit with the product. It can go over the requirements. Usually there is a PRD, which is a product requirement document, specifying all the feature that should be included in the feature, all the edge cases or the user cases. And it's all about communicating and prioritizing, saying, okay, I can add this search bar, I can add this functionality, but it will take me like 2 weeks. Is it worth it? Or can we just deploy the feature without the search? Can we do the table without the reset? Just to have value, added value for the customer without waiting for the search bar or the reset. Maybe we can do it in a second phase. So it's all about communication. It's all about prioritizing what should be included in the code and what not. And the same way, usually we have a UX UI person saying, okay, I want this to look like that, the button to have like a border radius of 2, and the color to be primary color and things like that. So we go over with the UX UI person and he specifies all the requirements, or she specifies all the requirements. And again, it's a communication and prioritizing. What can we do? Is the styling is really important, or can we go without it? So whenever we work as a team, because each and everything of it is a communication and prioritizing, we all want to feature to look the best, be the best, but sometimes it has prices. It will require more time, or require more work, and we have other things to do. Remember, we need to also review codes of our team members. We also need to think what to order for lunch. So we have limited amount of time, and we need to prioritize it accordingly. And we need to meet in the middle. I call it, there is a man in the middle attack, so this approach is meet in the middle approach. We need to find the middle, what we can do, what we cannot do, and include it in the feature. And then, once we are ready with a feature, we usually have product and visual review. We just don't have only code review, we also make sure that the feature we develop stands according to the product review, stands according to the visual review. So we're making sure the quality of the delivery is the best. And usually when we work on develop some important feature, some big feature, it's also best to do a technical design before. Design in advance what we are going to do, what is the architecture, what new components you're going to add. Have another team member from your team review it. Have the architect of the company review your design, give you a technical review. Maybe you missed something. Maybe you haven't thought of performance issues, scalability issues. So before you start a big feature, do the technical design in advance. That way you're making sure that the quality is the best, you haven't missed important information, you haven't affected the performance for the worst, and things like that. And there is also the QA. Sometimes we don't have a dedicated QA person working in the company, but sometimes we do, and it's best to communicate with her or him at the first phase as possible when you get a new feature. Make sure to go over the test plan. Sometimes when we have thought about certain scenarios, while the QA think about other scenario, she comes with her own perspective or own point of view, and we can talk with each other, brainstorm together about which scenario, edge case, which feature we need to check, which flows we need to check, and that way, when we think about all the opportunities, all the scenarios we need to take care of, our code is best, because our code catches all the different things we need to do, it handles all the edge cases, and when we get to the process of the code review, we don't get a comment say, listen, you missed this edge case, listen, you missed that and that. So our code, that once it reaches the PR review, it's in the best, because it's after a PR review, after a visual QA, after you sat with the QA person and thought all about the edge cases. So it affects the entire quality of your product. And remember, guys, girls, it's a team effort, it's a teamwork. We need to communicate, we need to collaborate, we need to make sure we help each other. We find a time to review others' code. We find the time to leverage it for professional growth. So it's the best to collaborate the best way we can, with respect to the other team members and with best communication. If you want, I've created a blog post summarizing the entire code review best practices, so you can scan this and get to the blog post. And I want you to thank you for attending this talk. I hope you learned something new, or even just remember like best practices you used to use, and that you bring those practices into your team. So thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of React Alicante.